Truth Unveiled here, and today we're going to be going over some major stuff. We're going to be talking about some huge events that are coming up in both the summer and the fall of 2017, and we'll be going over ones such as 923 and much more to come. Now, this video is meant to keep us all informed about what's going on in the world around us. It's not to make any type of predictions. It's not to place any dates anywhere. And it's not to say that, oh, major things such as martial law or anything could happen on these given dates, but rather to show you exactly what's going on and why 2017 is big indeed. Now, the very first one that we'll be focusing on is actually one that's going to be taking place tomorrow, and it has to do with Freemasonry celebrating their 300-year anniversary, and yes, it's going to be tomorrow. And this comes from the Masonic source book that even says founding of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. And it says that 6/24/1717 was the often cited founding day of Freemasonry. It was described in the following account, which first appeared in Grand Lodge 1717 through 1967 and was based upon documents created in and about 1738. And per this event, there's going to be huge celebrations all over the country, actually, including in places such as Marietta, Georgia, and many others. And there's going to be parades and whatnot tomorrow, actually celebrating the 300th anniversary of Freemasonry, and there are events all over. And it says that Freemasonry is the oldest, largest, and most widely recognized fraternal organization in the world. 13 signers of the Constitution and 14 of the U.S. presidents, among them George Washington, were in fact Freemasons, and just ask Bush and all those other ones because they're Freemasons too. And Freemasonry is more than just a fraternal organization. It's Satanism all over again. It's the worship of Lucifer. That's why they're called the Enlightened Ones, because Satan masquerades as a messenger of light. But I thought it was very interesting and suspicious indeed that it would just so happen to be 300 years of Freemasonry this year, especially when you look at everything else that's going on and coinciding this year indeed. And speaking of Freemasonry, this is right on time because later on next month, actually, of course, we have Bohemian Grove. And I've talked about this in a video last year, but of course, we'll reiterate it. It's when your world leaders, when they come together at a camp, and some secret camp in California, and do all types of camp activities and fun activities, not to mention rituals and sacrifices and demonic rituals to the owl, to Molech, that's who they're worshiping, along with child offerings, child pedophilia, molestation, blood drinking, poop eating. I'm telling you, this stuff is very disgusting what they do, and it's all the elite indeed. If you would like to learn more about what really goes on at Bohemian Grove, definitely check out my video linked below. But it's interesting because yes, this stuff even continues to this day, even as we speak. And like I said, this will be taking place next month. What better timing to celebrate 300 years of Freemasonry? And then we have more prophetic events that are going to take place in the sky, and we're going to be talking more about some of them in just a moment to come, including the 923 sign. But we also have the 2017 lunar eclipse that will occur and take place as of 8/7/2017, and this will come exactly 14 days before the total solar eclipse, or what's commonly known as the Great American Eclipse, in 2017. Now, I talked more about this in my video, and I'll be sure to link it below, but exactly 2 weeks later, we have the solar eclipse of 8/21/2017 that'll be all across America and will be visible in places such as Carbondale, Illinois, and many other places. Like I said, I go into more detail in this, and I cover it more in my video, and I'll be sure to link it in the description box below. But in the video that I did a few weeks ago, I also talked about how prophetic this sign really is and how it relates and is oddly similar to the eclipses that we saw back in 1619, including the lunar eclipse that was seen in 1619 as of 6/27/1619, and then exactly 2 weeks later, as of 7/11/1619, we saw a total solar eclipse that occurred over Africa. And like I said, said, when you know who the true people of Scripture are historically speaking and where they are, you know why this is so important. And when you know when slavery began and the year that it began, then you know why this is so important indeed and how prophetic this really is. And like I said, if you would like to learn more about that, please watch the video that's linked in the description box below. But we also talked about how if you take this eclipse from 7/11/1619 and if you calculate and add exactly 40 days to it, you arrive at 8/20/1619, as you can see right here, which is the exact same day that slavery actually began, and that slavery began in America when the first so-called slaves arrived here in America. Now it's interesting, if you take a look at the total solar eclipse that's supposed to occur on 8/21/2017, and you add about 40 days to it, you get around the time of the Day of Atonement. Is that a surprise or a coincidence? I don't think so, but we'll be talking more about that and its prophetic significance also. Now, coinciding with all of the prophetic signs in the skies, and like I said, we'll be talking about 923 more later on, but there's also CERN that we should be concerned about indeed, because CERN is also doing some very interesting and suspicious stuff indeed that also happens to coincide with this time frame too. And I'm here at the CERN website that says official holidays in 2017 and end of year closure 2017 and 2018. Now this is the official holidays that they'll be observing as of 2017. You can see a list right here. Now, if you take a careful look at this list, you start to notice something that's very alarming and very eerie indeed. And the very first thing that I notice is actually the one right here in September, as of September 7th. Now, if you were to take this one out and blot it out, that means they would only be observing public holidays. There would be a 6-month gap in between it. And again, that's if you do not count this one. I just found that very interesting. And if you find anything else that's interesting about this, please link it in the description box below and please let us know. I also thought this was interesting that they would even mention this, because we know this has to do with what? The Feast of Beltane. But the one I wanted to really focus on is this one, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But it's on September 7th, and it's very important indeed. Now, if you start to do some background research on this and really dig deeper, you see the prophetic significance. And of course, when it has CERN involved in this, we should be very concerned, because what are they trying to do? Open up portals and doorways for demons and cause what? Sudden destruction indeed. But it actually means Genevan fast, and it's a public holiday that's in the canton of Geneva, Switzerland. And it occurs on the Thursday following the first Sunday of September, dating back to the 16th century AD. In the background, it talks about how in the 15th century people fasted as a way of remembering famines, plagues, and wars. And this is a public holiday that's in Switzerland. But what I thought was interesting about this was how this began right before St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, and it says Geneva was a cradle of Protestantism and Reformation, just like the 500 years of Reformation that's going to be observed in October 2017, and we'll be talking more about that later on. Is that a surprise or coincidence? I don't think so. But then it says there was a Geneva-wide fast in the beginning of October 1567 as a sign of friendship with Protestants undergoing persecution in Lyon, France, and this was most likely the first Genevan fast. And then 5 years later, news of St. Bartholomew's Day massacre and the slaughter of several thousand Huguenots began as of 8/24, 1572, and this triggered a fast throughout Geneva on the following 3rd of September, which could be why the date of later yearly fast was shifted back by almost a month. So this Genevan fast this year is going to be taking place on September 7th, 2017, but there's a reason I left this highlighted, because what is this really representing? If you do more research on St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, you'll start to see even more interesting and suspicious things. And if you would like to read more on St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, I'll be sure to link it in the description box below. But why am I even bringing this up and why am I even talking about this? Because where else is Bartholomew depicted? Oh yeah, it's depicted at the Vatican, at the Sistine Chapel with the Michelangelo painting that says what? The Last Judgment, which is a second coming of YAHUSHA and the final judgment as it's depicted. And guess what? Bartholomew is depicted in this painting here. Oh, that's not a surprise or coincidence because we know darn well that the Pope and the Vatican are working hand in hand with CERN to push their one world religion and to push their scheme of sudden destruction and to bring about delusions and deceptions. And we know they're working hand in hand. It's a message indeed. Now here's some of the painting right here that shows Michelangelo's Last Judgment, and you can find it at the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. Now I've tried to enlarge it a little bit so you can actually see it on your own time, and I'll be sure to link it in the description box below. But this is the part right here that depicts Bartholomew actually. And like I said, if you take a closer look, it just so happens to depict and represent Last Judgment. And this is what CERN is going to be celebrating indeed. And it just so happens that all of this is going to coincide and culminate with the 9/23/2017 sign and also the lunar eclipse and the total solar eclipse, also known as the Great American Eclipse in 2017, just a few days sooner, a few weeks sooner actually. All of this coinciding together. What time is it? What time do you really think it is? Of course, while none of us know the day or hour, we sure do know the season. And it's what? The season of judgment. And that's why CERN is doing their awake experiment, or what's also called advanced wake field experiment. But the better question is, are you awake to what's going on and what CERN is actually really doing? Because what you're actually going to start to find is that this goes much deeper than we think. Because guess what? When is their next upcoming Awake collaboration meeting at CERN? Oh, it's from the 18th through the 20th of September 2017, just days before the 9/23/2017 Revelation 12 sign in the sky. Oh, what perfect timing indeed. So we see that approximately 2.5 weeks after the total solar eclipse, or what's commonly known as the Great American Eclipse of 8/21/2017, CERN will be observing the Genevan fast on September 7, 2017, and then just a few weeks later, right before the 9/23 sign, they'll also be meeting and having a collaboration with CERN's Awake project. Interesting. And we also talked about how this holiday, or should I say holiday, also coincides with Bartholomew and the Genevan fast and the Reformation period. And like I said, it's no surprise that this year also marks 500 years since the Reformation period, and that's going to be celebrated in October, which we'll also be talking about, but also how Bartholomew is depicted at the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, of all places, of what? Last Judgment. Oh, very interesting. But guess what's going to take place the very next day after this and after the Genevan fast holiday that's going to be observed? It's going to be Trump's 33rd week in office. Note the 666. It'll be 33 weeks since he would have been in office, because he came in office as of 1/20/2017. If you scroll down here, you see that September 8th, or the day after the Genevan fast, marks exactly 33 weeks. And we know how the elite love putting that number right in front of our face all the time, especially when it comes to Trump, the number 33. We see it practically everywhere, and we also know that it represents what? The highest degree of Freemasonry, the 33rd degree indeed. And it also has to do with and represent what? Freemasonry. And this year just so happens to be 300 years of Freemasonry. Oh my goodness. And culminating on that same week as the Genevan fast and also Trump's 33rd week in office is also the completion of Jupiter's retrograde motion. And I've talked about this too in the total solar eclipse video, but I'll also reiterate it here. But as of November 19th of 2016, and I've taken a screenshot from Stellarium, you see that the king star that represents the Messiah enters the Virgin constellation Virgo and enters the womb and pretty much stays there for about what, 9.5 months. And then if you take a look at September 9th of 2017, the J star or the King star, which represents the Messiah, YAHUSHA, being in the Virgin constellation, you see that it travels in the womb from this point here for a period of 9 months from here all the way to down here, and then soon exits the womb exactly 2 weeks before the 923 sign. And if you calculate these two dates and the time frame between them, you get a period of about 42 weeks, which is the same period as what? Of a pregnancy period, the birthing of a nation, birth pains. Is it starting to make sense now? And how close we really are to judgment indeed. And by the way, it's no surprise or coincidence that the retrograde motion just so happens to start on November 19th, 2016, because this can also be written as 9/11 twice and then culminates exactly 2 weeks before the 9/23/2017 sign. Now, of course, precipitating all of that is the CERN Awake collaboration meeting that will be taking place from the 18th through the 20th of September of 2017. And right after that is what? The UN International Day of Peace, as they call it, which will be observed on September 21st. And this theme for 2017, as they call it, is, quote, "Together for Peace, Respect, Safety, and Dignity for All." And when they say peace and safety, then comes what? Sudden destruction, as what? Travail upon a woman? And of course, the United Nations is continuously pushing their propaganda of what? Unity and togetherness. Here we go again, the one world order, new world order, and the one world government, trying to bring everyone together regardless of religion and all these things, just as the Pope is doing. And we'll be talking more about that too, because they say, quote, "In times of insecurity, communities that look different become convenient scapegoats. We must resist cynical efforts to divide communities and portray neighbors as, quote, the other." And then it says it will focus on engaging and mobilizing people throughout the world to show support for refugees and migrants. We see the agenda indeed. It will highlight solidarity with refugees and migrants and showcase the shared benefits of migration to economies and nations. But also it says too that on the September 15th of 2017, the Secretary General will celebrate the day in the Peace Garden at UN headquarters by ringing the bell and observing a minute of silence. And after that, we have the autumn equinox, which will be on September 22nd, 2017, which will be the first official start of fall. And we know that this is a very prophetic time indeed, because what happens in the fall too? We have the fall feast. We have Trumpets, Atonement, and Tabernacles. And we know that our Messiah, YAHUSHA, he came to fulfill the spring ones already. These ones have already been fulfilled, with Pentecost being fulfilled in Acts chapter 2, with the pouring out of the Ruach HaKodesh, or what's commonly known as the Holy Spirit, in Acts chapter 2. But the only ones that have yet to be fulfilled are Trumpets, Atonement, and Tabernacles. Trumpets, of course, representing the final trumpet being blown, Atonement representing, of course, deliverance and judgment to come, and Tabernacles representing the tabernacling with YAHUSHA, because YAHUSHA will tabernacle, dwell with us. So we know that this is a very prophetic time indeed, and these feasts have yet to be fulfilled. Am I saying anything big will happen on or around these feasts? We know what they represent, but we also know that we do not know the day or hour, but we sure do know the season, especially with the prophetic events and the signs in the sky. And then, of course, right on September 23rd, 2017, the very first day of fall that it will start on will be the 9/23/2017 sign, which is in fact the prophetic Revelation 12 sign, with the woman being clothed with the sun and the moon underneath her feet, as you can see right here, according to Stellarium. And above her, what, 12 stars above her head, or 12 crowns. And of course, the 12 stars that are over her head represents right here in the constellation Leo, the lion of the tribe of YAHUDA or Judah. And you can see right here on this particular date, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stars right here as normal. But then we have these three right here for a total of 12 stars. And there are many who are trying to say, oh, well, this is fake, and oh, this is a fake prophecy. I'm telling you, this is some real stuff indeed. It's time to wake up and see exactly what's right in front of you, not to mention the star alignment and how they all align perfectly. But if you thought that the Revelation 12 sign was the only thing that's going to take place on September 23rd, 2017, well, it's time to think again, because it'll also mark when the Pope first came to America to meet with President Barack Obama. And when did this take place? That's right, exactly 2 years ago on September 23rd, 2015, when the Pope and Obama met, and it was the Pope's first visit to America, of course, promoting the one world religion, and where he also addressed the United Nations. Now, back in 2015, his visit was only for about a week in America, and of course they were promoting and talking about conversations such as, quote, protecting religious minorities and promoting religious freedom around the world, and welcoming and integrating immigrants and refugees into their communities, just like the United Nations. What? The New World Order, trying to bring everyone together, merge everyone into their one world order. That's exactly what they're pushing and what they've been pushing, and I don't think it's a surprise or coincidence that it's exactly 2 years before. Now, this gives a brief timeline of the Pope's visit to America. You see that he arrived from Cuba as of the 22nd, and then the 23rd of September of 2015 is where he actually met President Obama. But then the 24th is when he had a joint session of Congress in 2015, and then the very next day, September 25th, 2015, is when he addressed the UN and also had that multi-religious service, which we're going to talk about more. And then the 26th and the 27th is when he was in Philadelphia. Now here's just more on the actual multi-religious service that occurred as of September 25th, 2015. It began at 11:30 a.m. and it ended when? At 3:30 p.m. 33. Oh, very interesting and suspicious indeed. They just love throwing that number around, don't they? And he was here at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum and the World Trade Center. 9/11. Aren't they planning a second 9/11? Oh, what are they really trying to tell us? But here it says that he paid a visit to the 9/11 memorial site, where nearly 3,000 were killed by so-called terrorist attacks of 9/11, and there the pontiff prayed at the site and met with local representatives of the world religions inside the Foundation Hall at the 9/11 Memorial Museum for a multi-religious meeting for what? Peace? Like peace and safety, and then sudden destruction. And you can see right here he was on stage with many people of multiple religions and different religions, all coming together to push the one world religion agenda. Now, if you would like to take a look at his speech, you also can, but I'm not going to go over all of it, but you will see that he talks all about what? Safety and security, all about peace. And it even says here, quote, this can only happen if we uproot from our hearts all feelings of hatred, vengeance, and resentment. We know that that is only possible as a gift from heaven. Here in this place of remembrance, I would ask everyone together, each in his or her own way, to spend a moment in silence and prayer. Then he talks about peace, peace in our homes, our families, our schools, and all communities. Peace in all those places where war never seems to end. And every time they mention peace, it's the exact opposite. It's war, because they know what's coming indeed. And of course, this coincides too with the what? International Day of Peace, just like he addressed the United Nations. But not only does September 23rd, 2017 mark exactly 2 years after the Pope's first visit to America, it also marks 67 years since the effective date of the McCarran Internal Security Act that was first effective as of September 23rd, 1950. So exactly 67 years ago, there's that number 13. Now, I've talked more about this act in my COINTELPRO video, which I'll be sure to link in the description box below so you can see it on your own time. Now, to quickly summarize, this act has two titles, one being the Subversive Activities Control Act and the Emergency Detention Act of 1950. The act also contained an emergency detention statute giving the president the authority to apprehend and detain, quote, each person as to whom there is a reasonable ground to believe that such person probably will engage in or probably will conspire with others to engage in acts of espionage or sabotage. And it's 67 years as of September 23rd, 2017. I cannot make this stuff up. What is this talking about? Martial law and pushing it, because it states that political subversives are to be rounded up and placed in concentration camps during a national emergency, and they already have the executive orders to go on that. Like I said, I talk more about that in the COINTELPRO video to really cover this act and what it's really talking about. And like I said, also, this act is very similar to the King Alfred plan, which I've also gone over in that video. And again, no coincidence that this year will be 67 years since this has been effective. But we're just getting started, because we also have prophetic events that are taking place in October of 2017. And we also have the Lateran Treaty, or what's also known as the Lateran Concordat of 1929. And the reason this is so important is because this was done back in 1929 as of 2/11/1929, and it recognized the Vatican as an independent state, with Prime Minister Benito Mussolini agreeing to give the church financial refund. And with the establishment of the Vatican, ever since, they've been pushing the one world agenda, merging all of these religions together, and this is a photo that's taken from that pact. And the reason this was so significant in history is because not only was this the establishment of the Vatican, but it was also the reestablishment of the Roman Catholic Church that was overthrown by Napoleon back in 1798. But there are even headlines back then that even show you exactly what happened, even here from the San Francisco Chronicle back on 2/12/1929, where it says, "Heal wound of many years." Oh, which wound? You mean the deadly wound in Revelation chapter 13? With the establishment of the Vatican, the deadly wound healed? Oh my goodness, very interesting and suspicious indeed. Why is this so important, and what does this have to do with October of 2017? Well, when you look at the date that the Lateran Pact was actually signed back on 2/11/1929, and you go to about October 19th of 2017, you'll see that the Vatican has been established as of this time for 88 years, 8 months, and 8 days. And also, from the time that Pope Francis became a pope as of 3/13/2013, or should I say the New World Pope, if you enter in October 4th of 2017, you'll see that on this time and around this time frame, he would have been pope for 1,666 days. Not to mention how October 25th, 2017 is 5,888 days following 9/11. Now, am I putting a significance on these dates? No, I am not. These are just things to watch out for. The entire fall and summer of 2017 is a time to really watch out for, and we are told and commanded to watch therefore, for we know not what hour our sovereign doth come. But there's even more, there is always more, because 2017 also marks the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, in which Martin Luther made his 95 Theses known to the world, thus changing the history of the church, country, and world forever. Now, it's typically held on October 31st alongside All Hallows Eve, or Halloween, or should I say Halloween, at the very end of October of 2017. And like I said, this has to do with the Reformation of when it comes to the church, but ironically enough, right after this, and if you look up the history of the Reformation, you'll see that this led to war after 1517, 500 years ago. And for the 500th anniversary, this will be an actual holiday for all of Germany, and in the United States, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is the largest Lutheran organization in the U.S., will be hosting an event to commemorate the Reformation in Washington, D.C., right around the culmination of what we see with going on with the Pope and pushing the one world religion. Here we go again. Now, it was also reported by a local German newspaper that the Pope himself was actually going to try to schedule a visit to Germany and even try to visit there around the time of the Reformation. Of course, there is no actual guarantee, nor have there been any other reports if the Pope will actually go to Germany or not. But he has actually received an invitation from Angela Merkel and also the President Gauck. Now again, whether or not the Pope will actually be visiting Germany, that's a wait and see type of thing, but we know without a shadow of a doubt that he'll also be taking part in the celebrations. But that won't be the only celebration taking place, because the exact same time of the 500 years since Reformation period will also be Halloween, and also will be Samhain, which is observed around the same time from October 31st to November 1st, which is about the halfway mark between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And then of course there's also too the Day of the Dead, which is also observed when from October 31st all the way until November 2nd. Now 2017 as a whole will also mark 100 years of Fatima too. 2017 will also mark 100 years since the Balfour Declaration was signed back in 1917, and also 100 years since World War I, 100 years of deceit, devastation, and genocide indeed. And look what day that it was signed on November 2nd, 1917, 100 years ago, right in time for the 500-year Reformation period, Halloween, or should I say Halloween and All Hallows Eve, Samhain, and Day of the Dead. Oh, no surprise or coincidence whatsoever. And of course, this has to do with the Rothschilds and how they established their fraudulent nation known as Israel, and also pushing the Zionist agenda, what they've been doing for a long time now, while also pushing for war and World War II. And then finally, we have the United Nations Day that will be celebrated on October 24th. And as of 2017, the United Nations will be turning 72 years old from their establishment back on October 24th of 1945. But like I said, these are just some of the many events that are going to be taking place in 2017 that are major. And if you know of any other major events, please tell us in the comment box below. And of course, while none of us knows the day or hour, we definitely know the season indeed. And now more than ever, we need to be watchful and alert and awake to the world around us, and continue to seek YAHUAH and his true son YAHUSHA for protection, because we know we do not have to worry whatsoever but find protection in YAHUAH and YAHUSHA. But this is Truth Unveiled here, saying as always, Shalom.